Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. In the United States, Democratic candidate Joe Biden appears close to winning the presidency after securing 28,000 more votes than President Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. The state alone is all Biden needs to win the presidency. He is also leading in Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona as vote counting continues. Biden has said he is confident of winning the election, but Trump warned him against declaring victory. As Democratic candidate Joe Biden inches closer to victory in the U.S. presidential election, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has called on the next U.S. administration to return to the nuclear deal commitments. In a televised speech, Rouhani said the Iranian people have been facing economic terrorism for the past 3 years. In Afghanistan, a former television presenter and 2 other civilians have been killed in a car bomb explosion in Kabul. Yamas Yawash died when a bomb attached to his vehicle exploded near his residence in the Afghan capital. No group has immediately claimed responsibility for the attack. France has registered over 60,000 daily COVID-19 cases, with the tally crossing 1.6 million. In India, 577 people have died and over 50,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Pakistan registered over 5,000 new cases and 20 fatalities overnight as the death toll rises to 6,943. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1.24 million lives and infected over 49.2 million people. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. In the United States, Democratic candidate Joe Biden appears close to winning the presidency after securing 28,000 more votes than President Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. The state alone is all Biden needs to win the presidency. He has gained over 74 million votes, more than any presidential ticket has ever got in America. This report has more details.
Democrat presidential candidate Joe Biden has once again urged Americans to remain patient and calm as ballot counting continues in a handful of states that hold the key to the White House. Speaking to supporters in Delaware, Biden said that the numbers told a clear and convincing story, and he is going to win the presidency. Biden gained lead over Trump in the battleground states of Pennsylvania and Georgia, as he already enjoyed a lead in Arizona and Nevada. Vote counts so far show Biden leading Trump by 4.1 million votes nationwide out of a record 147 million. As Biden inched closer to the win, hundreds of Democrats gathered in cities across the United States, dancing in celebration.
Just look at what has happened since yesterday. 24 hours. We were behind in Georgia. Now we're ahead, and we're going to win that state. 24 hours ago, we were behind in Pennsylvania, and we are going to win Pennsylvania. And now we're ahead, but we're winning in Arizona, we're winning in Nevada, and in fact, our lead just doubled in Nevada. We're on track to over 300 electoral college votes.
Meanwhile, in a tweet, Republican President Donald Trump warned that Biden should not wrongfully claim the presidency. Trump vows to press unfounded claims of fraud as Republicans sought to raise $60 million to fund lawsuits challenging the results. Dozens of Donald Trump supporters demonstrated outside the election centers in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, calling for count of legal votes.
I'm here because I don't believe Georgia is a blue state. I believe we are a red state. I think there's more afoot here than just normal legal ballots. So I find my freedom and my freedom of choice important to me.
Well, I'm upset about these votes. I know there's a bunch of voter fraud going on, and I think people need to step up, and I think it needs to be a fair election.
Some in Trump's camp define the legal efforts as disorganized. The close election has underscored the nation's deep political divides, and upon winning, Biden will have to govern a deeply polarized Washington.
As Democratic candidate Joe Biden inches closer to victory in the U.S. presidential election, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has called on the next U.S. administration to return to the nuclear deal commitments. In a televised speech, Rouhani said the Iranian people have been facing economic terrorism for the past 3 years. The president said he hopes those who sanctioned Tehran will realize that their methods have been wrong. In May 2018, President Donald Trump reneged on the nuclear deal signed between Iran and world powers in 2015. But Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has promised to return to the deal and ease pressure on Iran. Azerbaijan says its forces have liberated 16 more villages in the Upper Karabakh region from Armenia's occupation. Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said the villages were liberated in Fuzuli, Jabril, Zangilan, Gubali and Khojawand. President Ilham Aliyev announced the liberation of these areas on Twitter. Earlier, the Azeri Defense Ministry said the Armenian forces once again targeted civilian areas. In a statement, the ministry said its military dealt heavy damage to Armenian troops in response. The ministry stated Armenia's 178 reconnaissance battalion have lost half of its military personnel. It added the military personnel of Armenia's Special Forces unit were also surrounded and destroyed. Nearly 1,200 troops have been killed since the clashes broke out in September. In Afghanistan, a former television presenter and 2 other civilians have been killed in a car bomb explosion in Kabul. Yama Siawash died when a bomb attached to his vehicle exploded near his residence in the Afghan capital. Earlier, the Afghan government said the Taliban's Helmand governor was injured in an airstrike. The defense ministry said the head of Taliban's intelligence for Nadir Ali district and 9 fighters were also killed. Taliban have not yet commented on either of the 2 attacks. The spike in violence comes as the Taliban and the Afghan government continue deliberations on the framework of peace talks in Doha. In Iraq, the police have killed a protester in the southern city of Basra. Medics say around 40 others were wounded as security forces opened fire during clashes with hundreds of protesters. Local officials say protesters took to the streets demanding jobs and basic services. The clashes broke out after some of the protesters tried to set up tents in a public square. Iraq's Interior Ministry has confirmed the death of a 29-year-old man identified as an unemployed Iraqi, Omar al-Thiabi. In a statement, the ministry said it is investigating the incident as security forces are not allowed to use weapons against demonstrators. More than 500 people have been killed since the anti-government protest movement began in October 2019. HEZBOLLAH has condemned the U.S. sanctions on the president of Free Patriotic Movement Party in Lebanon. In a statement, HEZBOLLAH said the sanctions are political and undisguised interference in the internal affairs of Lebanon. It said the U.S. has no right to preach on fighting terrorism as it sponsors terrorism, corruption, and dictatorships across the globe. This came after U.S. Treasury Department blacklisted son-in-law of Lebanon's President Michel Aoun Gebran Bassel. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin says systematic corruption in Lebanon's political system was exemplified with Bassel. Responding, Bassel said he doesn't fear the Kurds and will never turn against the Lebanese people. The second phase of Egypt's general elections has started across 13 governorates. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has also cast his vote in Heliopolis city. Around 31 million Egyptians are eligible to cast their ballots over the 2 days. Some 2,000 candidates are competing for 70 individual seats, while 284 candidates are competing under the list system in 2 districts. Egypt's National Election Authority will announce the results of this phase on the 15th of November. Earlier, a pro-government party won a sweeping majority of votes in the first phase. The U.S. Agency for International Development says it will grant $20 million to the World Food Program to purchase wheat for Sudan. In a statement, the agency said the funding will enable the World Food Programme to provide over 65,000 metric tons of wheat for Sudan. It added that the grant represents Washington's contribution to a $45 million commitment to provide Sudan with wheat. In October, the U.S. announced that it will rescind Sudan's 27-year-old listing as a state sponsor of terrorism. The status had restricted Khartoum's economic links and cut it off from crucial financial assistance. In Guinea, a court has rejected opposition claims of fraud, confirming President Alpha Conde's re-election for a third term in last month's vote. Conde won over 59% of votes in the October 18 contest. Earlier this year, Conde held a referendum to remove the two-term limit, allowing him to rerun for the presidency. His candidacy sparked widespread protests that left dozens of people dead. Ivory Coast opposition leader Pascal Affi Guessan has been arrested north of Abidjan for creating a rival government. The SCAM says prosecutors are investigating President Alassane Ouattara rivals for rejecting his re-election. The prosecutors are also pursuing terrorism charges than a dozen opposition leaders. The standoff has raised fears of protracted instability in the West African country. Earlier, Ouattara won a third term in office and announced the creation of a transitional council. But the opposition claims Ouattara has violated the constitution by seeking a third term. More than 40 people have died in clashes before and since the latest vote. In Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has vowed further airstrikes after jets bombed the opposition-held region of Tigray. He was speaking in parliament as lawmakers approved the formation of an interim government for the region. The military conflict broke out on Wednesday following weeks of tensions over Tigray's unilateral decision to elect a regional administration against Abiy's wishes. The conflict drew international calls for restraint, with a warning that clashes could spark a civil war. In Nigeria, protests against police brutality have intensified as security forces fired tear gas to disperse the crowds. Local media said police also used gunshots on the protesters in the capital, Abuja. Led by former presidential candidate Omoyele Sowore, the demonstrators gathered outside the National Assembly complex. Mass protests began earlier this month against killings and mistreatment by police special anti-robbery squad. Despite disbanding the police unit, demonstrations have continued in Lagos and other parts of the country. Last month, President Muhammadu Buhari called on the youth to end their protests across the country. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says he wants to have better ties with Washington after the U.S. presidential election. The president expressed concern with the uncertainty of the election results in the U.S. Maduro said Americans no longer want imperialist wars and threats. The International Civil Aviation Organization has asked Iran to speed up the probe into the downing of Ukrainian airliner in January. The UN agency said it has had several exchanges with the Iranian authorities to investigate the incidents in accordance with its provisions. Responding, Iran's air chairman Farhad Parvez said Tehran has responsibly reported to the organization on the progress. He said Iran is obeying international rules and will send the final draft of the report to the participating nations soon. The Ukraine Airlines flight was shot down by an Iranian ground-to-air missile, killing 176 people. The UN has called for holding credible elections in Myanmar to help advance human rights and democratic reforms. Secretary General Antonio Guterres' spokesperson hoped they will pave the way for the return of refugees. Stefan Dujarric urged a ceasefire across the country to allow everyone to focus on combating the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the spokesman said all parties to the armed conflict must respect their obligations under international law. He said Guterres will follow the general elections in Myanmar on the 8th of November. Meanwhile, civil society groups said dozens of networks on Facebook are spreading falsehoods they fear could lead to strife. They are also worried it may undermine the upcoming polls in the country. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now moving on to France has registered record over 60,000 daily COVID-19 cases, with the tally crossing 1.6 million. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1.24 million lives and infected over 49.2 million people. More pandemic updates in this report.
The coronavirus continues thrashing relentlessly as the world reports hundreds of thousands of daily cases. The European continent has emerged to be the epicenter of the virus in the second wave. The region now accounts for more than 12 million cases and over 300,000 deaths. The United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, Spain, Greece, Norway, Denmark, and many others have shut down daily lives considerably to cope with the virus's spread. In France, the virus has exhausted the healthcare system as authorities say the younger population is equally being attacked by the virus.
At the beginning of the second wave, it was more vulnerable people and more elderly people coming to the hospital. But for several weeks now, that's no longer the case. The average age of patients in the unit has lowered. We have people aged 40 or 30 who even had to be intubated and ventilated.
Over in Asia, the outbreak in India continues to overwhelm the authorities. 577 people have died in the country and over 50,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned a unique mutation of the virus in Minsk has the potential of a global spill of a new strain.
We are working with our regional offices in Europe, in Wipro, and in the Western Pacific and in the Americas, where there are mink farms, because there are many mink farms all over the globe, and looking at the biosecurity on the mink farms, looking at the surveillance that's happening in these mink farms, and to support countries in taking the right steps to prevent the virus to continue to circulate in minks and to prevent spillover events from happening.
In the United States, infection tally has exceeded 9.7 million, with over 236,000 deaths. The White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has also tested positive for the virus. In Latin America, the virus continues to remain the most fatal in Brazil. The country has reported nearly 300 deaths and over 18,000 cases in the past 24 hours.
Pakistan has reported 20 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The health ministry said the country's death toll has risen to nearly 7,000. The ministry said 1,502 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. It added that the number of active cases in the country is nearly 17,000. More than 317,000 patients have recovered so far across the country. It said 890 patients remain critical. Hong Kong's chief executive says whoever wins the U.S. presidential election should end interference in China's internal affairs. Addressing media in Beijing, Carrie Lam expressed hope that U.S. approach to Hong Kong will improve. Lam said every country and government should respect the jurisdiction of another country.
Administration in the United States of today, I would like to make this appeal that every country, every government should respect the jurisdiction of another country and another territory. For the past year or so, the American administration and officials have been repeatedly interfering with internal affairs of the People's Republic of China and the internal affairs of Hong Kong. That is totally unreasonable and could not be justified in international relationships.
The U.S. had sanctioned Hong Kong officials, including Lam, on adopting a law safeguarding national security. And now moving on to the European Union has imposed sanctions on 8 ministers newly appointed by Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. In a statement, the bloc accused the officials of violent repressions of Syria's civilian population. It said the curbs include ban on traveling, freezing of assets, ban on the import of oil, and export of technological equipment. The bloc added the total number of sanctioned persons has risen to 288. The EU said 70 entities are also subject to an asset freeze. It said Brussels is committed to finding a lasting and credible political solution to the Syrian conflict on the basis of UN resolution. The European Union has imposed sanctions on Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko and his son Viktor Lukashenko. In a statement, the bloc said 15 people are blacklisted in relation to the violent repression and intimidation of peaceful protesters. The sanction list also includes police chief of the Russian intelligence agency and Lukashenko's chief of staff. This brings the total number of Belarusians sanctioned by the European Union to 59. The sanctions freeze their assets in European states and prevent them from obtaining visas to enter the bloc. The EU rejects Lukashenko's controversial re-election on the 9th of August. Belarusian president denies all allegations. Storm Eta has unleashed havoc in Central American state of Guatemala, killing over 100 people in mudslides. President Alejandro Giammattei has hinted the death toll could rise to 150 in the village of Queja. The president has termed the situation in Queja critical as no bodies have been recovered from the area as yet. The military said forces have been sent to the remote village where the mudslides have destroyed nearly 150 houses. A military spokesman said many of the dead were buried in their homes. Bad weather continues to hammer rescue efforts when roads are still blocked and large areas remain flooded. The air quality in India's capital, New Delhi, has remained in a severe category for a third straight day due to increase in stubble fires. India's Environment Monitoring Agency says vehicle emissions were also adding to the bad air quality. It said air quality will remain in a very poor category for the next 2 days. The agency said the air quality index in New Delhi state stand at 441 on a scale of 500. It said no quick recovery is expected unless a drastic reduction in stubble burning. Earlier, the Delhi government decided to ban firecrackers and announced steep fines for any violations. After years of delays, the first government-funded mosque in the Greek capital, Athens, has opened its doors to worshippers. Athens has not had a formal mosque since Ottomans left the region nearly 200 years ago.
Thousands of Muslims from countries including Pakistan, Syria, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh live in Athens. But until now, they had been forced to pray in makeshift mosques, in warehouses or basement apartment buildings. The Muslim community had been lobbying the government for decades, and it seems their prayers have finally been answered.
It's an historic moment for the Muslim communities living in Athens. We have been waiting this mosque for so long. Since the first law was passed in 2006, it took 14 years because there were so many bureaucratic barriers and some legal issues with the construction of the mosque.
The new building in Athens Vitanikos district will serve around 500,000 Muslims. Its construction had been riddled with controversy, including the change of locations due to protest by some locals. The construction finally began in 2017, and now after its completion, Muslims are breathing a sigh of relief.
The mosque for us Muslims is something very important, and I would like to thank Allah. I would like to thank the Republic of Greece, which helped us to complete this project.
Athens was the only European Union capital without an official mosque. Though some Muslims are unhappy with the mosque's appearance, as it lacks a dome or a minaret, others say it's a welcome start.
Scientists in northern Russia have discovered a huge Atlantic walrus haul on the shores of Kara Sea. The walruses bask on the seashore where their habitat is under threat from shrinking ice and human activities.
A drone footage shows thousands of walruses laying on a frozen beach in Yamalo-Nets region. According to an archaeological research, the area was known to ancient humans, walruses hunting spots some 1,500 years ago. In recent decades, Atlantic walruses were only spotted in dozens on haulouts of the Yamal Peninsula. The haulout, a place for refuge where walruses congregate, reproduce, and socialize, is located in a remote corner of the peninsula.
It is known for sure that all of its haulouts are located on islands. All of the Atlantic walrus subspecies are located exclusively on islands. The only Atlantic walrus continental haulout in the universe, which I once said carelessly, or at least the only one on the planet Earth, which is true, is at Out Yamal.
Scientists say they counted over 3,000 animals last month. They predicted there were signs that up to 5,000 animals may be hauled out at the site.
We have seen very clearly that this haul-out was at least 1/3 bigger before we arrived. The traces of walrus bodies on sand as they come out of the sea are seen very clearly, especially with a drone. And when we project those numbers, we can be sure to say that the size of this haul-out is between 3,000 and 5,000.
Walruses haul-out have traditionally been located on drifting sea ice or on Arctic islands. However, warmer climate cycles mean sea ice is shrinking and habitats are under threat from oil and gas exploration and Arctic shipping.
Actor Johnny Depp has announced his resignation from the Fantastic Beasts movie franchise. This comes after the actor lost a case against a tabloid that called him a wife beater.
After being found guilty of libel by a British tabloid, Depp says Warner Bros. Studios has asked him to leave his role as villain Gellert Grindelwald. In a social media post, the actor said he has agreed to the request. Later, in a statement, Warner Bros. Said that the role of Grindelwald will be recast. The third film of the spin-off from the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling recently resumed production. The film is expected to arrive in movie theaters in 2022. Meanwhile, Depp says he plans to appeal the judgment against him in the London libel trial.
More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Libya's crude oil output has surpassed 1 million barrels per day from 8,000 a few days ago. In a statement, the National Oil Corporation said oil workers managed to increase the output despite difficult circumstances. The country's oil revenue saw a sharp decline during the September to October period. The North African country is still restarting oil fields after the lifting of an 8-month blockade by Eastern forces. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his country is very well prepared to move on without a post-Brexit trade deal. But Johnson added he believes a deal can be done if the European Union wants to do it. The Prime Minister said it all depends on the partners across the Channel. He said London can do very well on Australian terms without a deal. The UK's National Audit Office has warned of significant disruption when the Brexit transition period ends. The watchdog says it is very unlikely traders will be ready for checks the EU is due to impose at its borders. It says the UK ports have limited time to test new IT systems. Russia's Thursday Daniil Medvedev has reached the final of the Paris Masters. He defeated Milos Raonic in straight sets. Medvedev hit 31 winners to 12 unforced errors at the Bercy Arena, where the tournament is being played without fans due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Medvedev will face either Alexander Zverev or Rafael Nadal. In the English Premier League, Manchester United have come from 1 goal down to beat Everton at 3-1. With this one, United have moved to the 15th spot on the table, while Everton are 5th. Bernard opened the scoring for the Everton in the 19th minute with a crisp strike, but 2 second-half goals from Bruno Fernandes made the score line 2-1 in favor of United. Then the third goal in the injury time from Edinson Cavani completed a dramatic turnaround. Earlier, Southampton beat Newcastle United 2-0 to go top of the league for the first time ever. And now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. And for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.